Storytellers must always choose what to include in a narrative and what to leave out. It can change what we think about the characters and how we make meaning from their stories. The most effective storytellers know the power they hold is not just to share a story, but also to influence thought patterns, assumptions, convictions, and values by how they tell it. And while history's retelling has often been done by men, and in terms of which men were present at the scene, the writer of the Gospel of Matthew chose to include 4 women in recounting the genealogy of Jesus: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. The inclusion of women here, in a world based on patriarchal lineage, is surprising in and of itself. And the inclusion of these particular women, given the somewhat scandalous nature of each of their stories, may cause a reader to pause. For example, in Tamar's story, when her husband dies, her father-in-law Judah fails to follow through on what's required of him by levirate marriage law, to provide another male family member to father a child. So, to ensure her protection and continue the family line, Tamar poses as a prostitute and tricks Judah into fulfilling this role himself. When he realizes what she has done, he admits he acted wrongly and affirms that her actions were righteous. Like Tamar, the other women listed in the Gospel of Matthew's genealogy of Jesus each have something a bit disruptive about their stories. What does their presence in Jesus' story have to teach us? Some people will say the unexpected inclusion of these 4 women in the Gospel's list of Jesus' ancestors demonstrates how God can work through anybody, even those whom society deems unworthy, or that it shows redemption by Christ is never out of reach, even for those with tarnished reputations. But I think the author could still have made that point by listing the men of questionable character involved in this family tree. The choice to include these women offers us something different, something more. It shows us God's will for the world carried out through listening to the cries of the poor and letting them take the lead. The men in each of these women's stories, privileged by social hierarchy and circumstance, decide to act in only their own interests and not take into account the responsibility that comes with such a position. This causes disproportionate suffering for those around them who don't have similar access to power and influence. And yet, it is there, among those who have been harmed, that we find not just cries for justice, but also creative and effective solutions to right wrongs, restore relationships, and move forward in a way more aligned with God's will. Ashley Wilcox, a Quaker minister and author of The Women's Lectionary, calls the women named in the genealogy of Jesus the mothers of Advent. And I don't think it's because their short stories in Scripture include the arduous ways they came to give birth. I think Wilcox calls Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba the mothers of Advent because of how they labor for justice and ensure God's will is done, even when those with power question, neglect, or avoid their duty to protect the vulnerable and cultivate life. Within systems built to keep them silent, supportive, sacrificed, these women raise their voices, devise plans, and take action to ensure the flourishing of what had been entrusted to their care. They sustain life and a path for God's presence to be known on earth. Pope Leo, in his recent exhortation De Lexite, says, "Contact with those who are lowly and powerless is a fundamental way of encountering the Lord of history. In the poor, God continues to speak to us." He goes on to say he is convinced that the preferential choice for the poor is a source of extraordinary renewal, both for the church and for society, if we can only set ourselves free of our self-centeredness and open our ears to their cry. Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba faced various instances of hardship, oppression, and abuse when a system and people that should have protected them failed to do so. Yet they refused to be silenced by their circumstances or to accept unjust outcomes. They knew the way back to righteousness, not just for their own sakes, but for the sake of the world. When we consider the important roles they play in the story of Jesus, it affirms the importance of today's marginalized voices too. Who among us today faces a similar fate to these women? Who needs protecting from current systems and those acting out of self-interest? Who holds the power and the responsibility to protect them? And who holds the wisdom of another way forward, a way that repairs and restores and renews.